What is going on, guys, and welcome back to Touchdowns to Home Runs. My name is Bernie. Thank you for joining us today on the Touchdowns to Home Runs show. Hope that your day is going absolutely fantastic. Today, we're going to be doing a season preview for the LA Dodgers in the upcoming 2021 MLB season. We'll be taking a look at their depth charts, breaking all that down, and make sure you stick around to the end of the video because I'll be giving you my predictions on what to expect from the NL West division in the upcoming 2021 season. But the Dodgers coming off their World Series victory in the 2020 season, and the big free agent signing of Trevor Bauer. You know, the National League reigning Cy Young Award winner, the Dodgers trying to pick up exactly where they left off. And I mean, when you look at this Dodgers roster and their depth chart from a glance, this is probably the most talented team in baseball. A fantastic lineup with a ton of power. Obviously, their rotation, they're the only team in baseball with 3 former Cy Young Award winners, and they got a pretty decent bullpen as well. But we're going to be breaking that all down. Before we get into looking at the lineup, just note that I am using Roster Resource on Fangraphs as reference. But anyways, again, this is a very deep lineup led off by probably Mookie Betts and one of, if not the most talented players, possibly besides Mike Trout, in all of Major League Baseball. This is a guy who's got 30-plus home run power, projected by Fangraphs for 33 home runs. A guy who can steal bases. He's pretty quick. He's the ideal leadoff hitter. Has a pretty good average, can push right around that 300 range. And get on base as well. Probably the best on base guy or second best on base guy in this Dodgers lineup. And obviously Mookie Betts also tremendous in terms of what he can do defensively in right field. Batting second, we got Corey Seager at shortstop. Now, Corey Seager had a fantastic year last year. He had an even better postseason last year. And I want to see Corey Seager stay consistent throughout an entire MLB season. This is a guy, again, just like all the top 3 hitters in this lineup, is probably a guy who, should be expected to be into the 30 home runs. He's a guy who, again, can push the 300 average, gets on base fairly well as well. And I mean, this is pretty scary top 2. And you look down the lineup and who you're going to have to face if you're pitching against the Dodgers, then it doesn't really get much easier. And again, a ton of power. Third hitter, Max Muncy, left-handed hitter. Dodgers actually have 4 left-handed hitters in this lineup. Possibly their second best power hitter in the lineup, with the exception of Cody Bellinger, but another guy who could push that 30 home run. He's another guy who gets on base. Not too high of an average from him. I would like to see him get up towards 250 as well. But, I mean, fantastic power that you're getting from that 3 spot. You got Will Smith at your 4 spot. Guy who's going to hit you probably 20 home runs. Again, I would like to see him get his average up. I would like to see a little more production in terms of on-base percentage. But you want your power hitters in your middle of your lineup. And I mean, that's where you're getting. Will Smith is a guy who, again, could hit well into those double-digit home runs. And if he gets that average up, I think he's a very solid hitter there. At the 5 spot, we got Cody Bellinger, best power hitter in this Dodgers lineup, a bit inconsistent at times. We could see him potentially at first base, probably more likely in the outfield, but this is a guy, if he stays consistent, if he can get his strikeouts down, this is possibly one of the best hitters in the National League. A guy who could get into the 40 home runs, a guy who even potentially could steal a few bases. Again, would like to see that average get up. I would like to see him become a bit more of a complete hitter, but I want to see him get those strikeouts down especially. And I think Cody Bellinger could end up moving up in this Dodgers lineup. And then you got Pollock batting 6th, another quality bat in the outfield, another guy who could push 30 home runs. And then you got Rios and Chris Taylor as your 7 and 8. But what I really like about this Dodgers lineup, again, I was talking about the power. Your 7-8 hitters are projected plus 20 home runs. There's not one hitter out of these 8 guys in the Dodgers lineup. And even some quality bats off the bench. When you look at a guy like Gavin Lux, all of these guys could easily get into 20 home runs and above. And I think that's what makes this Dodgers lineup so good, because you can't really pitch around anybody. You pitch around a Max Muncy, all of a sudden you're facing Cody Bellinger with men on base. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the Dodgers can do in terms of offensively this year. Next up, we got the starting rotation. Now, the starting rotation, again, as I was mentioning before, obviously addition of Trevor Bauer, which means that now the Dodgers are the only team in Major League Baseball that have 3 former Cy Young Award winners in their rotation. We'll start with Trevor Bauer. Dodgers had to pay a lot to get him in order to take him away from the Mets. But, I mean, you're talking about a guy who was the Cy Young Award winner in 2020, even though it was a shortened season, and he was essentially one of the best pitchers in 2018 and 2020. I mean, you can look at him overall over the course of his career and say, well, he's only been under like a 4.18 ERA once in his career besides 2018 and 2020. But I think you're looking at a high strikeout guy. You're definitely looking at a fan favorite guy. He had a whip well under 1 last year. And I think he just didn't get as much attention as he would have gotten if it was a full season or if he was with a team other than the Reds. And I think this is a perfect spot for him to be. He loves the attention. I think Dodgers fans are going to absolutely love him. And having him as your, 2 or 3 starter, possibly, maybe even your 1 starter, I think the Dodgers rotation come playoff time again is just so deep. You got Kershaw. Now, Kershaw has been inconsistent. He's battled some injuries over the course of the past few years. I would love to see Kershaw bounce back this year. I think he's a guy who, according to Fangraphs as well, is a guy who could be right around a 3.5 ERA. He's a guy who historically, over the course of his career, isn't a guy who walks a lot of people, gets a fair share of strikeouts. If he could pitch, close to that 200 innings mark and stay healthy and stay on the field, I think that's just going to be such a plus to the Dodgers rotation. You got Walker Buehler, possibly their ace. Which is weird to say when you got guys like Kershaw and Bauer in the rotation, but Walker Buehler has been fantastic in what we've seen from him in his young career so far. Also a guy who could be sitting right around a 3 ERA, a guy with high strikeouts and low walks. He's been inconsistent at times, but I think if he can do it over the course of the full season again, this is a guy who could, be in NL Cy Young Award talks, in my opinions. You got some questions at the bottom of the rotation. David Price is in there. Again, David Price has battled some injuries. A lot of people think David Price is well out of his prime now. But I still think he's got the ability to give the Dodgers some quality innings. I don't think he's going to be a vintage David Price, but if he could stay healthy, keep the ERA right around 4, I think Dodgers fans should be happy. In terms of the Dodgers 5 spot in the rotation, you got a few different options. You got Urias, you got a guy like Gonsolin, maybe a guy like May as well. This is a rotation that you'd feel pretty comfortable running 7 deep. It'll be interesting to see who they actually pick to be that 5 starter if they do end up going with the 5-man rotation. But we'll have to see probably until spring training to see who wins that number 5 spot, in my opinion. And then finally, we'll just round it out with the bullpen. Probably the weakest spot of the Dodgers, but I don't really think the Dodgers have too many weaknesses. You got Kenley Jansen being a bit inconsistent recently. Fangraphs has some pretty low expectations for him with a 4 ERA, but again, I think Kenley Jansen is a guy who could bounce back, be a top closer in the NL. You got Blake Trinan, you got Gatterall, even Joe Kelly. It's a pretty deep bullpen. Nobody who really stands out as being necessarily fantastic, but I think a lot of guys who have been good in the past and guys who could potentially just be really quality pieces in those 6, 7, 8, 9 innings for the Dodgers. But I think, you have those extra starters who might end up going into the bullpen, possibly guys who you could move into trade scenarios as well. So I do think the Dodgers have a lot of good quality options. And now, in terms of the NL West, this is an interesting division. You have the Rockies, who have already moved Arenado and who are probably going to move Trevor Story and maybe German Marquez as well. By the start of the 2021 season. So I'd write the Rockies off. The Diamondbacks as well. I don't think they're going to be competitive in this division. The most questionable team, I would say, is the Giants. Now, I expect the Giants to still add another guy before the start of the 2021 season. This is a team who has a lot of good depthy pieces in their lineup. But they don't really have a number 1 starter. Team who just missed out on the playoffs last year. But I don't really think the Giants are much of a threat to the Dodgers. And then you got San Diego, obviously, led by Tatis there. They're building a fantastic young team. And that's a very interesting rotation that they're building. But with all that said and done, the Dodgers are, in my opinion, the most talented team when you look at them on paper. They're coming off their World Series victory last year. I don't see any reason why the Dodgers wouldn't be one of the most, if not the most competitive teams in Major League Baseball this year. So even though I do think the Padres will be extremely competitive and probably sneak into a wild card spot, I don't see the Dodgers losing this division. But you guys can let me know your thoughts on this division, on the Dodgers. Let me know it all down in the comment section below. If you did enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a thumbs up, subscribe to Touchdowns to Home Runs for more content just like this. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time.